It all began like a typical high-stakes political panel in Washington, D.C., bright lights, a global audience, and rising tensions between two powerful voices, Senator J.D. Vance and President Ibrahim Traoré. But something felt different. From the moment the cameras started rolling, the atmosphere wasn't just political, it was personal. Vance had just finished harshly criticizing African leadership, using words like chaos and dependency, even muttering lost continent under his breath. Still, Traoré remained calm, almost too calm. Then everything changed. A man in the audience, pretending to be a technician, suddenly jumped up and threw something toward Vance. Panic broke out. Secret Service agents rushed in. People screamed and ducked, but not Traoré. He reacted instantly, raising his arm and catching the object in midair. It was small, shiny, and clearly some kind of rigged device. The whole room went silent. Cameras zoomed in. Traoré didn't look surprised, he looked prepared. He calmly placed the device on the moderator's table and said, "Is this your democracy? Because mine doesn't begin with sabotage." A stunned Vance turned to him and asked, "Why would you stop it? Aren't we enemies?" Traoré looked straight into his eyes and replied, "I debate enemies. I don't ambush them." Just like that, everything changed. Traoré wasn't just a foreign leader anymore. He had just protected a U.S. senator from a possible attack, right there on American soil. The media went wild, social media exploded, and the crowd froze. Then Traoré picked up his mic and calmly said, "Now, can we talk about who really wants war and who just stopped one?" This wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a wake-up call. The live feed cut to a commercial break. But backstage was even more intense. FBI agents rushed in, producers yelled directions, and Vance, still shaken, pulled Traoré aside and asked, "Why did you really do it?" But Traoré didn't answer right away. He looked around the room, at the cameras, the stage, and the chaos that had almost been perfectly scripted. Then Traoré leaned in and said, "Senator, if they can try something like that with you, imagine what they've done to us for decades." Vance froze. "Are you saying this attack came from inside?" he asked. Traoré replied, "Your enemies and mine might not wear the same uniform, but they shake hands with the same people." Moments later, the FBI placed the device on a table to inspect it. Hidden inside was a flash drive. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a data leak. It contained blueprints, schedules, names mostly American. One name stood out, Sparrow, a code name linked to secret U.S. operations in West Africa. Vance looked at the files, his face turning pale. "This was meant for me," he said quietly. Traoré shook his head. "No, it was meant to either frame you or kill you, both meant to silence you." Outside, news networks scrambled to control the story. Some said Traoré saved Vance. Others hinted it was staged. Was it foreign sabotage or internal betrayal? But while the media argued, Traoré stayed focused. He looked Vance in the eye again and said, "I stopped a device today. What I really want is to stop a system. Are you ready to have that conversation?" Vance didn't reply, but the fear in his eyes said enough. Traoré wasn't acting like an outsider anymore. He was inside the system, and now he was exposing everything. Within hours, footage of him catching the device spread worldwide. People watched it on screens from New York to Nairobi. Hashtags like #TRA or #acute the shield and #Vance saved went viral. Right-wing outlets called it an attempted assassination. Left-wing channels questioned if it was all a setup. But underneath all the headlines, one question kept getting louder. Who wanted J.D. Vance dead, and why was Traoré the one to stop it? That same night, Traoré received a message from his top intelligence officer in Ouagadougou. "Sparrow is real." It read, "It's linked to a secret fund through Langley and a private bank in Geneva used for hidden operations, African coups, and resource grabs. And guess what, Ibrahim, you're on their list." Traoré looked at the encrypted message glowing on the screen, then glanced across the dim hotel room where J.D. Vance sat slumped in a chair, his usual fire gone from his face. "Your system has claws, Senator," Traoré said quietly. "But you never thought it would turn on its own." Vance muttered back, "You're assuming this wasn't just some radical off the grid." "No," Traoré replied firmly. Radicals don't know where you sit. Bureaucrats do. The next morning, both men were scheduled to appear together for a joint press conference, meant to show unity. But Traoré had no intention of sticking to the script. When he approached the microphone, he ditched the teleprompter and spoke freely. "Someone tried to silence this man," he said, nodding at Vance. "And I don't have to agree with him to know silencing isn't debate. Sabotage isn't democracy." Then he looked directly into the cameras. "If they're willing to do this to one of their own, imagine what they've already done to the rest of us." A quiet shock rippled through the press room. Vance stood beside him, silent. He didn't deny it, he didn't have to. Back in Washington, the White House went into full panic mode. National Security Advisor Donnell Grove barged into the Oval Office, transcript in hand. "This man is not just off script," he snapped. "He's dangerous. He's turning your own people against you, and the worst part is, he's making it believable." President Biden looked grim. "Where's Vance now?" he asked. "Still at the hotel," Grove replied. "He won't take our calls." He paused. "And Traoré? He's trending." Meanwhile, back in that hotel, Traoré and Vance sat in tense silence. No more microphones. No cameras, just two men caught in a moment too big to control, both wondering who the real enemy was. The tension between them was still heavy, but no longer hostile. Vance finally broke the silence. "You think I don't know this system's broken?" he said quietly. "But you act like your hands are clean. You really believe you've got no blood on them?" Traoré didn't blink. "We all carry blood," he said. "The difference is who we bleed for." There was a long pause. Vance looked at him and said, "You're not what I expected." Traoré replied, "And you're exactly what I hoped for, someone who still listens when the cameras are off." Just then, a knock at the door. A staffer entered and said, "They want you both in the debate hall. 10 minutes. But this debate wasn't just about politics anymore. After everything that had happened, the whole world was watching, waiting for a clash that could shift more than just opinions. Behind the stage, the hall was packed, journalists shoulder to shoulder, advisors sweating under bright lights, producers shouting into earpieces. Yet it was the quiet between the crowd's movements that spoke loudest. This wasn't about policy now, it was about power. Vance adjusted his tie behind the curtain. Pale but steady, Traoré stood calmly in his collarless uniform, hands relaxed. A staffer handed him a pre-written speech, but he didn't even look at it. "You're going off script again, aren't you?" Vance asked with a half-smile. Traoré looked over and said, "I never had your script to begin with." As the lights dimmed and the moderator's voice filled the room, the two men walked onto the stage together. They weren't allies, not yet. But what they were was far more dangerous. To people who had both seen the same broken machine from different sides of the glass, the moderator jumped right in. "Senator Vance, yesterday's incident made global headlines. Do you believe your own government failed you?" Vance paused. Then, surprising everyone, he turned to Traoré and asked, "Do you?" The whole room went still. Traoré stepped forward and said, "Let me answer that." He looked at Vance and continued, "Your system didn't fail you, Senator. It revealed itself." The moderator raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" he asked. Traoré didn't pause. "It means you were always just important enough to be used, but never valuable enough to be protected." Gasps spread through the crowd. Vance stayed silent, but his silence said it all. The moderator, clearly shaken, asked, "And what are you suggesting, Captain Traoré?" Traoré replied calmly, "I'm saying the wolves only show up when you're close to the truth." Cameras captured every flicker of emotion, tight jaws, shifting eyes, uncomfortable glances from powerful people in the front row. Traoré wasn't just addressing the panel, he was speaking to everyone who was tired of being lied to. Backstage, aides rushed to cut the feed, but it was too late. The footage was already out, downloaded, clipped, subtitled, and spreading fast. Traoré had just shifted the entire debate and redefined who the real enemies were. CNN tried to edit it, MSNBC tried to spin it, Fox News went quiet, but TikTok didn't. Within minutes, the clip of Traoré saying the wolves don't attack unless you're near the truth went viral. Young Americans stitched it with scenes of broken factories and government bailouts. African creators translated it into 20 languages. European reporters tweeted, "He said what our own leaders won't," and deep inside a CIA bunker, analysts watched the clip on repeat. One leaned back and whispered, "This isn't just a moment, it's a mirror." Back at the hotel, Vance sat alone with a glass of bourbon, watching the clip over and over. When Traoré walked in, Vance didn't look up. He just said, "You made me a traitor in my own party." Traoré calmly poured a glass of water and replied, "Then maybe your party was the problem." He didn't say it with anger, just with truth. What made Vance most uncomfortable wasn't Traoré's words, it was how calm he was while saying them. Traoré didn't need to yell to shake the system. He just needed to believe in what he was saying. "I can't protect you anymore," Vance said quietly. "I never asked you to," Traoré replied. Vance stood up, took a deep breath, and said, "They're going to spin everything. They'll say this was planned, that we staged it." Traoré looked at him and said, "And what will you say?" Vance hesitated, then replied, "I'll say you made me see something I didn't want to see." Traoré nodded, not proud, just understanding. Suddenly, the door burst open. A producer rushed in, out of breath. "There's going to be a second broadcast tonight. It's already scheduled. Prime time. They want you both on stage again." Vance frowned. "Who's they?" The producer paused. "Everyone. This next debate would be different. No stage lights, no scripts, no pre-approved questions. Just the truth or whatever could survive." The pressure, it was set in a plain warehouse in Pittsburgh, with no banners, no podiums, just two chairs, a camera, and a single mic hanging from the ceiling like a trap. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was something bigger. Vance looked nervous. Traoré didn't. The live broadcast opened in silence. Then one question flashed on screen. "What do you owe the people? Who trusted you?" Vance looked down. Traoré stared straight into the camera. "I owe them honesty," Vance said. "Even if it hurts." "No," Traoré replied. "You owe them courage. And you haven't paid." Round the world, audiences leaned in. Traoré wasn't loud. He wasn't angry, but somehow that made him even more powerful. He stared straight into the camera, not like he was speaking through it, but as if he was speaking to every person watching. "You defend the system because it kept you comfortable," Traoré said. "But comfort has destroyed more lives than any weapon I've ever seen." Vance fired back. "It's easy to criticize. Governing is harder." Traoré didn't blink. "And yet I govern without billionaires whispering in my ear." That hit hard. No one expected him to say it out loud. The live chat exploded. Did he just say that? This is history unfolding. Vance tried to steer it back. America doesn't need insults. It needs to remember who it is. Traoré responded, firm and quiet. "No, it needs to remember what it's done." The silence that followed felt like a weight in the room. Then Traoré stood, faced the camera one last time and said, "I came here with nothing to gain. I leave with nothing to lose. But millions heard me, and they won't forget." He walked off, leaving the chair empty. Vance didn't stop him because, how do you interrupt a storm? Backstage was chaos, phones ringing, doors pounding, producers yelling, but Traoré had already stepped into the cold, gray evening outside, walking alone, untouched by the storm he just unleashed. Inside, J.D. Vance sat still, head bowed, hands clasped. A CNN producer leaned over. "They want a response. Do you want to stay silent?" Vance looked up. What would silence fix? Cameras rolled again, not for a counterattack but for something rare. A man facing truth on live television. "I've spent years defending a system," Vance began, "but tonight I saw it from the other side." And somewhere nearby, watching from a small screen in a quiet van, Traoré didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just nodded because this wasn't about winning. It was about waking someone up. And the world, it was already wide awake. One tweet said, "This isn't politics anymore. This is soul-searching." In Washington, Senate aides rushed to write new talking points. In Silicon Valley, tech CEOs started asking how they missed what the world was feeling. In Atlanta, a civil rights museum asked to archive the debate footage. And in a classroom in Detroit, a teacher played Traoré's speech and asked her students, "What does real leadership sound like to you?" Meanwhile, Vance made one final move. He stepped off the set and into the rain, where Traoré was standing under a flickering streetlight. "You meant everything you said, didn't you?" Vance asked. Traoré didn't blink. "I meant every word." But I didn't say it for you. Then who? Vance asked. For the ones still listening. Traoré replied. Vance reached out his hand not to agree, but to acknowledge a simple gesture that said, "You didn't just push back, you made it matter." And in that moment, two men from very different worlds stood together not as friends, but as two people who recognized the truth. The broadcast ended quietly, no music, just their silhouettes fading into the mist. The next morning, America didn't wake up to headlines, it woke up to questions. Clips of the moment went viral, translated and subtitled into dozens of languages. But no matter how it was said, one message came through. Traoré didn't come to play their game, he came to change it. Vance canceled his next 3 interviews not out of fear, but out of reflection. For once, his silence wasn't weakness, it was respect. Traoré returned to his hotel alone, no press, no crowd, just a handwritten letter slipped under his door by a hotel staffer. It read, "You don't know me, but you spoke for me. Thank you for saying what no one else dares." He folded the letter, tucked it into his coat pocket, and walked to the window. Across America, the political world was in full panic. One senator called the event a media ambush. Another warned, "He's dangerous, not because he lies but because he refuses." 2. Fox News painted it as foreign interference. MSNBC called it a moral awakening. And in the middle of the chaos, one phrase trended everywhere. Hashtag he blocked it. But what stood out most wasn't just the viral moment, it was what followed. When asked if the White House would officially respond to Traoré's remarks, a spokesperson replied coldly, "We don't comment on foreign provocateurs." Traoré's reply came a few hours later at a quiet press conference. No flags, no anthem, no script. "I'm not your enemy," he said, "but I won't let you pretend to be mine and call it peace." The room fell silent. Then he delivered the line that shook the world. "You ask why I stood up for J.D. Vance. Because truth is truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it helps someone I disagree with." That single sentence broke through the noise. For the first time in months, Americans from both sides of the divide were sharing the same quote, not because they agreed, but because it hit something real. Traoré didn't just protect a man, he held up a mirror to a nation. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. J.D. Vance asked to meet Traoré again. No cameras, no press, just a quiet room in a Washington, D.C. brownstone. When the door closed, there was silence, long silence. Finally, Vance spoke. "What you did back there, why?" Traoré leaned forward, steady as ever. "Because I don't have to like you to defend you. I just have to believe in something bigger than both of us." Vance let that sink in. "That's what they don't get," he said. "We disagree on everything, but I've never felt more exposed." "Good," Traoré replied. "Now ask why." For over an hour, they talked about broken systems, buried stories, justice, fear, what it means to speak for the unheard, and what it costs. Outside, news of the private meeting spread fast, and the rumors exploded. Some said Traoré was trying to recruit Vance. Others claimed Vance was preparing to switch sides. A few even called it a publicity stunt. But none of that was true. What really happened was simple. Two men found rare ground between them. Not agreement, but mutual respect without giving up what they believed. As they left, a young intern across the street snapped a blurry photo. Within hours, it went viral. One comment captured it perfectly. "You don't have to agree with Traoré to admit he changed the conversation." He didn't just stop an attack, he ended the silence that usually follows. That night in Burkina Faso, Traoré walked the streets of Ouagadougou with no bodyguards, shaking hands with vendors, students, and elders. A child came up to him and asked, "Did you really save him?" Traoré crouched down, smiled, and said, "No, he saved himself. I just gave him the chance." The next morning, J.D. Vance posted a single sentence: "The truth doesn't care where you stand, it only asks that you listen." And for once, the internet didn't argue, it echoed. This wasn't just a debate, it was a collision between comfort and courage, silence and truth. In a world where loyalty often screams louder than logic, one man stood not to get applause, but to block a blow. In doing so, he didn't just protect a person, he challenged an entire system. Traoré didn't pick sides, he picked principle. He reminded us that justice isn't supposed to be convenient, and sometimes standing for truth means standing next to someone you don't even agree with. J.D. Vance, whether people liked him or not, had to face something rare in politics: an honest mirror. That handshake between them didn't mean unity, it meant awakening. So if anyone asks, why did Traoré do it? The answer is clear: because silence is safe, but truth demands courage. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shake the room.